Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Program, Mr. Jacob Bundrick. He is a policy analyst at the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics at the University of Central Arkansas. Jacob, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to hit leadoff today on a busy day for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great that Donald Trump just, has been talking about tax policy and rolling this out, because you have written a paper that I think is very useful, very beneficial about the state of Arkansas, state taxes and manufacturing productivity, a case study of Arkansas. And so I have a few questions about this paper, but what led you to want to write about this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. This is a paper that was published in the academic journal called the Journal of Regional Analysis and Policy, and it's kind of right in the bread and butter of ACRE, where we want to look at the data in Arkansas and see what policies can help Arkansans become better. And so when I first got to ACRE a few years ago, we had kind of been looking at some different manufacturing data, some different data in different industries around the state, and we really noticed that Arkansas was lagging behind in a lot of different categories in manufacturing. So we'd seen less growth in the real dollar value of manufacturing, so less growth in GDP. We'd seen a greater decline in manufacturing share of GDP than our neighbors. We'd seen a faster rate of manufacturing job loss than our neighbors. And so we really got interested in this idea. And one thing that we found that we thought might be a root cause of it is that we've seen slow growth in labor productivity, which basically means manufacturing output per manufacturing employee.
Okay. And I think you've done a great job here pointing out, what the issue is and really some of the consequences for not, making attempts to try to fix this problem. On page 21 of your paper, talks about the high tax burdens here in Arkansas. They're costing the state almost $2 billion a year in manufacturing GDP. So do you have any idea what taxes specifically, Jacob, are preventing this nearly $2 billion in manufacturing GDP?
Yeah, so the first thing that we did is just kind of look at the total tax burden as a percentage of state GDP to give us an effective tax rate. So GDP can be thought of as productivity, so your tax collections are a nice, easy way to look at what your effective tax rate are. Gets around the complications of the different tax structures in states. And so we found this negative relationship between the total tax burden and manufacturing productivity, and we thought, wow, that's interesting. It's in line with what other literature suggests, but we thought it would be more useful to look at the different tax components. So there's really four big ones, right? You think of corporate income taxes, individual income taxes, property taxes, and sales and use taxes. And what we found is that two of those taxes have are the primary drivers of this negative relationship, and those are the corporate income tax and the sales and use tax.
Okay, so the corporate tax and the sales and use tax. Okay, so you say that those are the biggest tax burdens right now that you think is correlating in preventing that $2 billion in manufacturing output that we're not seeing.
That's what our evidence would suggest, based on our estimates, using the empirical techniques that we did.
Wow. Okay, so what specific rates need to be cut? Have you thought about that in terms of how much do we need to see? What rates need to be cut, and then how much increased manufacturing GDP? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the way that we went about thinking about this is kind of twofold. One was we looked at our bordering states with a few other states thrown in there like Kansas and Alabama, and we said, okay, one way to look at it is what would happen if we picked the median state and cut our tax rate to the median state's rate, and that was Missouri. So we can go through our using our estimations from the empirical model. We can arrive at a number and say, hey, we're losing about I'm losing the number here. We're losing about $1.6 billion in manufacturing GDP as a result of having such a high tax burden. And then another way that we did that is just looking at the average tax burden in the region, saying, if we just move to the average, became more competitive in our region. We're not looking at going to zero.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking at going to 1%. We're just trying to be average. What would that bring us to? And that, running through that estimation puts us at increasing GDP, manufacturing GDP by about 1.5 billion to 1.6 billion, assuming all else is equal.
Gosh. So, I mean, we're essentially, what we're hearing, folks, we're talking with Jacob Bundrick from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. So we're hearing that the tax burden in Arkansas is prohibiting, manufacturing from being able to produce more. It's inhibiting their productivity. And you've mentioned the sales tax rates. You've mentioned the corporate income tax rates.
The maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. My name is Paul, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Welcome. Happy Monday to everybody out there. One way, if you want to sound off about the program or contribute to it in any way, you can do that. The phone number to do that, call us or text us, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Wow, interesting stuff last week. We're still kind of figuring out the fallout. We've got really two levels of fallout from two big stories last week. The first of which is that Senator Jim Hendren, the head of the task farce. Should I call it a tax farce or should I call it a tax force? And the reason I say tax force is because I got a feeling in roundabout terms, they're going to force us to raise taxes. They're going to, they're kind of the tax force, you know what I mean, in terms of they're trying to figure out how to raise taxes, take more money from us, and call it a tax decrease, call it a tax cut. Anyway, the first fallout is from Senator Jim Hendren. We exposed on this program that Randy Bauer, who is the head of the consultant group that the tax farce used your money to pay, is actually a lifelong Democrat. That's right, Senator Jim Hendren really delivering here after 4 months of very, very, I guess I would assume, tough deliberations. He delivers with a lifelong Democrat and a Twitter feed that reads like a tax and spend liberal progressive. Now, that's the first one. We're going to get caught up on what's happening with that. The second fallout and development has to do with the landmark case last week where the Arkansas Supreme Court said that general improvement funds are unconstitutional, that it's essentially you can't launder the money and claim that it has a specific purpose because it violates the Arkansas Constitution, that the full legislative body, the legislative branch of government is in charge of spending money, and we got to know where that money is going. I told you a little bit about this on Friday. The biggest thing this ruling did, in my mind, is reiterate what the writers of the Arkansas Constitution knew, and that is we have a 3/4 majority rule in both chambers of the legislature, a requirement, 3/4 vote to spend money. You don't need that for anything else, but to spend money, you got to have 3/4, 75%. And, this business, and we'll get into this more at 5, I believe, more at 5 or maybe even 4:30, but we've got fallout from this, and we've got people now saying, don't worry, we're going to reform it. We're going to reform the GIF problem, and we're just going to give the money to the governor. And I want to talk a little bit later how that is actually doing nothing but increasing the power the governor has in terms of how really just providing a new mechanism for him to control other legislators, for him to increase his authority and power now that he's going to be in charge of where the money goes. And I'll talk to specifically, I want to talk about Senator Jonathan Dismang, the current pro temp of the Senate, and his comments about how basically, there's really no problem here. We're giving this all to the governor. Again, the telephone number, 870-275-9799. But first, let's hear what Michael Wickline has to say over at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Here is the headline: Task Farce on State's Taxes Gets Down to It. 16 members voice ideas and fears. Immediately, right out of the gate of this article, in the second paragraph, we figure out something is amiss. Because in the second paragraph of this article, Michael Wickline writes, and one of the task farce's leaders, Senator Jim Hendren, a Republican from Sulphur Springs, said $100 million a year should be the starting point for the panel's discussions about future income tax cuts. Wow. He says this after a week where his consultant had been exposed as a liberal Democrat. He goes to the paper and he says, we are going to do tax cuts. $100 million a year is our starting point. I guess we could call this the red line, if you will. If there ever was a red line in terms of Arkansas tax policy, here's Jim Hendren's red line. We are going to start with $100 million. That's our starting point in tax cuts.
Paul, have you ever jumped off a cliff into water before?
Yes, I have. It's invigorating.
But do you remember that? You know that one kid who goes up to the line and then really slowly backs off? I think this is what's going to happen. Here's my line.
Gosh.
I'm going to start slowly backing off of it.
That's pretty good. That's that's a good analogy. And yes, we all know that person. That it's like, I'm going to do it. It's a 40-footer. I'm going to do it. I don't know if I've ever jumped off a 40-footer. I know at Lake Norfolk I've jumped off like a 30-foot cliff, and I was amazed at just how, I just remember you really you're in the air and you're falling and you have time to think about, wow, I'm falling for what seems like a long time. It's like time just slows down. All right, so are we just supposed to just take this? All right, $100 million is now all of a sudden the starting point. Now, this is a shift, and I'm going to tell you why this is a shift, and Jim Hendren saying this. And in order to do that, we have to take a little flashback. We have to go back to when Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum convened the very first tax farce meeting. Joe, you have this audio pulled up. We played this for you last week. Take a listen.
It's going to be, I think, a very robust debate that will take place over the next year and a half as to our tax policy here in Arkansas. And I know a lot has been kind of written about the mandate, so to speak, and it seems to always be mentioned that it's about which tax cuts are going to be put forth in the next General Assembly, and I think you are all familiar with the fact that that is not necessarily the overriding mandate of this task force.
So that is not the tax cuts are not the overwhelming mandate. So in that this is the whole thing going forward. And then last week, of course, the cat is really out of the bag. There were members of that task force, ladies and gentlemen, that had no idea they had hired a lifelong Democrat and liberal. No idea. And a basic Google search of this guy's Twitter, you can go read some of the papers. I know some of the papers that he's written for Hawaii. He's also consulted for Hawaii on their tax policy. And people are finding this out for the first time. Oh, what have we done? And once again, Senator Jim Hendren is exposed as being the guy that's like, follow me. You want to repeal Obamacare in Arkansas? Follow me. You want real tax reform in Arkansas? Follow me. And then everybody figures out that the devil's in the details. And all that we're really doing here is trying to protect the status quo, the political establishment, the Arkansas political status quo just in general. Forget the Republican-Democrat thing, and that you're just doing what Uncle Asa is wanting to happen. This is who's going to inform our decisions. Is it whatever Uncle Asa wants? And in this case, whatever Randy Bauer says, this consultant we're paying over $300,000 to tell us about how liberal tax policy is a good thing, and you don't want to be Kansas. Whatever you do, you don't want to be Kansas. And it's a complete joke to me. Now, you also have to read between the lines. What does Michael Wickline say here? And one of the tax farce's leaders, Jim Hendren, Republican Sulphur Springs, said $100 million a year should be the starting point for the panel's discussions about future income tax cuts. Now, this is what they're going to do. They don't want to reform the whole system, right? They don't want to get rid of the income tax. They just want to lower it. They want to play with the rates. They want to lower it. And then they can tell you, this is the simplest way for them to trick you, is to say, we lowered your income taxes, whatever amount it is, this percentage or a dollar figure. And then they're going to come around and they're going to get rid of exemptions, which to me is a separate topic. And it will be a net increase to the government. Mark my words, they're going to take more money from the people, and then they're going to give you tax cuts in return for that, and they're going to call it a tax cut when in reality they're not really going to get spending under control. Although I did see, I think it was even Hendren, he was talking about, he was actually talking about spending cuts for the first time, and I was like, wow, where is all of this coming from? Now, here is just a little bit of what I think is the real truth, and you need go no further than State Representative Joe Jett. Hang on, let me. Here we go. So Joe Jett, scroll on down to Joe Jett's comments if you can, Joe. It starts with the first It's a paragraph that starts with another task force member. Okay. So Michael Wickline writes that another task force member, State Representative Joe Jett, a Republican from Success, said in an interview, quote, "My hope is going forward, even if we don't have the money to do something, that we can come up with a comprehensive plan for when we have the money to do it." Now, what do you interpret that to mean?
Sounds to me like he's on the bus with Asa on the idea that we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem.
That's exactly right, Joe. Now, it's even if you really want to think about it, I believe there is a thread of honesty with what Representative Joe Jett is saying that is an overwhelming consensus among the committee, among the task force, that this is what they're really here to do. When you read Joe Jett's statement, that is way more in line with what you hear Jeremy Gillum say a couple of months ago, that tax cuts are not the mandate. All of a sudden now, Jim Hendren is saying we're starting with $100 million. And just a coincidence, by the way, that it's a week after everybody figures out that you've just hired a lifelong Democrat to advise Republicans on how they should cut taxes or reform the tax code or whatever you want to call it. Right? Whatever you want to call it. And you read Joe Jett's statement here, and this is telegraphing what the real truth is. This is telegraphing what the whole point of this is. And the whole point of this has been to protect government revenue at all costs. And I predict to raise your taxes, to raise the amount of revenue that they're taking from us. At the end of the day, they can call it a tax cut as they want, just like they called Obamacare Arkansas Works, right? They can call it whatever they want. But if there is more money going to the government, it's a tax increase. If there's less money going to the government, it's a tax cut. Those are the definitions. And I know I'm just telling you the way it is. We are in a budget crisis in the state of Arkansas. They know it. People who look at the numbers know it, but they don't want you to know it. And yet we're all clamoring for real conservative tax cuts, real limited government, shrinking the size of government, and they say they look at the numbers and they say we can't do that because we have to pay for welfare programs. And that's the reality of Arkansas. That's the reality of the situation right now. I also noticed that Jim Hendren, as you come on down in this article, he starts talking about internet sales taxes, and it's an interesting assumption here. Interesting assumption here by Senator Jim Hendren, when it's almost as if he wants to know how much money that we are going to get from an internet sales tax. And if you really look at this, what he's done is he's moving the goalposts. We're not going to talk about whether or not we need an internet sales tax. We're not going to have that debate, even though the people have rejected it. The people's representatives have. Listen to this. Hendren said that for the November 7th through 8th meeting, he has also asked Bauer, this is Randy Bauer, to develop estimates of how much revenue the state loses from internet sales. State officials have repeatedly said they don't know how much revenue the state is losing from online sales, although others have estimated the loss at $100 million a year. They also say they're barred under law from disclosing how much a taxpayer, such as Amazon, has paid in sales taxes since it announced it would begin to do so earlier this year. He writes, this is a quote from Jim Hendren. I want a firm answer on the internet sales tax. How much can we really expect? And it's not because I want to see that much more revenue. It's because I want to know that's money we have to provide tax relief somewhere else. So we got to know what the amount is so we don't get ourselves in a bind. Now, I want to point out, Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin sent a letter to the tax farce and said revenue-neutral tax cuts are not tax cuts. And Senator Hendren here, even though he's saying we're going to start with $100 million, it all looks good, but Senator Hendren here in this is advocating for revenue-neutral tax cuts. We want to raise taxes on the internet, and we promise we'll cut your taxes the same amount. Something tells me it didn't work out with the military retirement exemption because, and I don't think it'll work out here. I think you're going to end up, it won't even be revenue-neutral. They're going to find a way to get more money for the government. I can promise you that. I'm going to wrap this segment up. Well, we may go a little bit further. Matter of fact, I think we will, because I want to go revisit some other audio clips. You know, how many times is this going to happen, Republicans? How many times is Senator Hendren going to be like, I've got the solution, follow me? And then the devil's in the details, and we figure out that's not the case, that you're not actually working towards a limited government end. And I'll give you proof when we come back. You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program. Back in a minute.
The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, Contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you.
Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions.
Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Want to go back and listen to previous shows? Apple users can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Don't have an Apple device? Head on over to paulharrell.com and click on Podcast. It's free and available 24/7 because the Liberty Machine never sleeps.
Here's what the bill says. I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just going to tell you, each one of these cases that I put up there is where it says it ends Medicaid expansion. It ends it. And there's a lot of people who say, well, it would have ended anyway. It would. The private option would have ended. Medicaid expansion would not.
That is Senator Jim Hendren, where he went to a. This is an audio from when Senator Jim Hendren, the majority leader, went to a Tea Party meeting, the Tri-County Tea Party in Pope County, and I attended this event. And this is the event where Senator Hendren put my photo up on his slideshow, criticizing me for saying that his bill didn't end the private option or didn't end Medicaid expansion. And, of course, he puts his bill up and says this is where it ends Medicaid expansion. And somebody call me if Medicaid expansion is ended. Anybody want to call me and tell me that Medicaid expansion is ended? Anybody? I'm reminded of the similar situation with our tax policy right now. Jim Hendren is the leader. Jim Hendren hires a lifelong Democrat to advise the task force, or the tax force, or the tax farce, however you want to say it, right? What's the difference? We don't have conclusive results yet. Maybe they actually reduce the size of government, limit government, reduce spending. You see, if they would just cut spending, there's your money right there to give back to the people in the form of tax cuts. But that requires actually reducing departments, maybe personnel, waste, fraud. It's a lot easier just to hire a lifelong Democrat to tell you, you know what? You can't do that stuff. No, instead, you need to protect government revenue at all costs, and we'll just shift the money around, and then you'll be able to tell people that you cut their taxes in this category, and hopefully, we're not going to tell them that we raise their taxes in this category. More on this when we come back.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
So why do you think that ranks as the most significant factors? And, when we're talking about what's hurting manufacturing, why is it the corporate tax? Why is it the sales tax?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because that's always the next step in one of these analyses is to think about what's causing that. And so the corporate income tax is fairly easy to explain. There's a lot of literature on this, and what it suggests is that the corporate income tax raises the cost of user capital. And basically what that means is corporations end up investing less than they would have. When we tax them, it actually raises the cost of capital to them, so they're less inclined to invest in more capital, which make people more productive, and so we end up with less output. The sales tax is interesting, and it's a little bit counterintuitive than what you'd expect. But we suspect there's some other channels that's working through. Most states exempt manufacturing inputs and business-to-business inputs or sales from the sales tax. So you wouldn't really expect that the sales tax would increase the cost of capital. Arkansas used to tax the input of business machinery, but we got rid of that in the last session when we flipped InvestArc and exempted that sales tax. So that's a natural step for a next study, is looking at what is the root cause of sales tax affecting manufacturing productivity.
Yeah, on page 17, you discuss in your paper about how an inventory tax and a capital stock tax, you mentioned these, and I'm not really familiar with this. Can you explain to us what those are and what their impact is on the manufacturing productivity? And can we reform these?
Yeah, certainly. So an inventory tax is essentially a property tax on a business's inventory. So you think about someone who's going through, or someone who has a manufacturing facility. They have these raw materials. They have halfway finished goods. They have some finished goods that are sitting in the warehouse. So we actually apply a property tax to that inventory. Wow. And that's problematic because it distorts business decisions, right? So you think about, we don't have an Amazon warehouse around here because we would tax all that inventory that's in that warehouse, right? And
hang on. Now that's interesting. Jacob,
about how much to produce, how much to hang on to.
Yeah.
And we don't really want them thinking about those decisions. We want them thinking about how do they make a better product, which markets do they need to get to, things of that nature. So we're distorting their process there.
Well, I want to mention,
it's also called a franchise tax.
Yeah, Jacob, can you hear me?
It's essentially a tax on a business's wealth. All right. So in a lot of ways, it serves as a duplicate income tax. We already have an income tax. It's not really clear why we would need to tax a business again on top of that. But both of these are really outdated taxes, and we should really think about reforming them.
Yeah. Jacob, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Sorry. I was trying to talk over you. I apologize. You mentioned if Amazon came here, we would be taxing the stuff sitting on their shelves that hasn't been sold yet if they had a warehouse. And there was talk about us trying to get an Amazon warehouse here, maybe using maybe turning a former military base into that sort of thing. And what you've just essentially told us is there's no way they would do that. There's no way they would come here and then be subject to our oppressive tax code.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why businesses make location decisions. It's they got to think about how close they are to their
7 days a week, because the Liberty Machine never sleeps.
870-275-9799. For our online audience, the poll from the past you were just watching was my interview with Mr. Jacob Bundrick. And Jacob was talking about one of his recent papers with the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, and it was really, really good stuff. Now, we're going to be talking with Mr. Bundrick on Wednesday at 4 o'clock and his colleague, Dr. Tom Snyder, on occupational licensing in Arkansas. That's right. And the paper's already out. But occupational, you understand, at least I heard this statistic at least a couple of years ago, that we have more licensing boards in Arkansas than the state of New York does. Think about that for a second. Think about that. Wouldn't you, I mean, I'm no fan of task farces, but wouldn't you rather have a task farce that's trying to reduce those instead of, the task farce on Obamacare where they decided to keep it, or another task farce on taxes where they're going to decide to keep our taxes the way they are or cut them here and raise them there to make us, feel good about ourselves? What's funny is the Arkansas Center for Research in Economics, that should have been the consultant that Jim Hendren hired, but it would have been embarrassing because if they'd had hired actual conservatives or actual free market pro limited government tax policy, then it would have looked pretty bad when Jim Hendren would have rejected their ideas because Asa Hutchinson would reject their ideas. That's the truth of the matter. Asa Hutchinson would have rejected their ideas. And I'll give you an example. Hang on one second. This is what Jim Hendren said in an article last week about the consultant. Remember, no, it was 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the consultant that they were going to hire. This is before we knew that Randy Bauer was a lifelong Democrat, and his Twitter feed looks like something of a Bernie Sanders supporter, you could say. And this is so before we knew all of this, it was just about the consultant. And you had Jim Hendren saying, I'm defending the consultant process. We need a consultant. And you had Senator Brian King, who was saying, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't be spending the money to do this because tax policy is something that, politically speaking, it's been debated forever. Not to mention the Republican Party platform says what it says. Shouldn't you guys just be implementing that? No. We can't do that. We can't do that. Conduit for Action, by the way, has a great piece comparing party platforms. The Republican Party platform versus the Democrat Party platform versus the Libertarian Party platform versus the Democrat Socialist of America Party platform versus the Communist Party platform. Fascinating to go actually read those different platforms and figure out. It's just fun how bold, the socialists will be. So what did Jim Hendren say in the article? This was a headline, 3 hires add to state's consultant tab. This is a quote from the article. When an agency, such as the Human Services Department, says its recommendations come from 2 years of work by a consultant-advised task force, Hendren said, quote, it has a whole new level of credibility versus this is what 3 or 4 legislators thought, and the Bureau of Legislative Research gave them these facts, especially when you are doing hard things. He said that in defense of hiring a consultant because the consultant will make the legislators more credible when they go to their colleagues and they tell them to vote for this. He said that in defense of a consultant that he went ahead and hired who is a lifelong Democrat. You can't make this up. And you're telling me he just so happens to go to the paper and immediately say he's trying to put out the fires, man. I'm telling you, this guy wants to be the president pro temp of the Senate, and he just hired a lifelong Democrat to advise Republicans on tax policy, and he gets busted. Everybody knows it. It was a simple Google search, a simple Twitter search, and now he's on the front page of the paper saying, we're going to start. The starting point is a $100 million tax cut for the income taxes. Give me a break. They're trying to keep this whole tax farce from falling to pieces. And then you have Republican Joe Jett saying, well, our hope is that if we don't have the money to do tax cuts, we'll get a plan together so when we do have the money, we can do tax cuts. Again, gotta protect how much money the government is getting now at all costs. Never mind the fact that we have a huge spending problem. $133 million ASA's first year in increase, $142 million ASA's second year in spending increases, $170 million in ASA's third year in spending increases. Why couldn't they just not spend more each year? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Phone number is 870-275-9799. I want to spend a little bit more time on Senator Jim Hendren. At some point, you got to lose credibility. At some point, you do. I don't know what Senator Jim Hendren's plans are in the future. I honestly don't. I don't know if he really wants to be the Senate, the president pro temp of the Senate, take Jonathan Dismang's place. I mean, right now he is the majority leader. But I will just tell you this. He has got to have the support of Republicans, and I know that the leadership tries to put out this false narrative that everything's fine in Little Rock, but there's a lot of unhappy people in the state. There's a lot of unhappy Republicans because they know what's really going on. The truth is getting out there. Knowledge is power. And anyway, I don't know. I think the whole thing kind of may be starting to ravel apart. People are talking, and I think they're tired of the same people, quote, leading in a, quote, conservative direction that is later found out to not be conservative when we have the votes to really do things conservatively. If Asa and Jim and nephew number 2 didn't control where the goalposts were. They set where the argument is, and the argument isn't shrinking government. It is protecting government. Because that's what Asa believes in. I think you need to take a listen to this. And in all seriousness, the same thing that Jim Hendren said in 2015 when he misled an entire group of limited government conservatives and said, follow me, I will end Medicaid expansion. And then, by the way, have we gotten a phone call that Medicaid expansion ended? No. Have we gotten a phone call?
Here's what the bill says. I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just going to tell you, each one of these cases that I put up there is where it says it ends Medicaid expansion. It ends it.
Haven't gotten a phone call, I guess. Last I checked, Medicaid expansion is still around. We still have it. Interesting. Very, very interesting. We couldn't do real tax reform back in January because the governor said no. I don't want to do real tax reform. Hey, let's have a task force. That's the only way these guys know how to govern, and they only do it to control the outcome. Follow me. Trust me. Yes, I'm the governor's nephew, but trust me, I'll end Obamacare in Arkansas. Follow me. I'll get us real tax reform. And then you hired a lifelong Democrat. I can't say it enough, folks, because it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. If I was a Republican on that task force right now, I would resign. I would resign. I'd say, you know what? This is stupid. We're doing the exact same thing that we did last time. Remember this?
When we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass.
What was that?
Here's what the bill says.
What was that?
When we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass. It's a different situation down here today, and we have the opportunity to make real change and to pass legislation and do things. We also have an opportunity to screw it completely up and get the blame for it.
Who gets the blame now? Who gets the blame for hiring a lifelong Democrat? Anybody?
Here's what the bill says. I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just going to tell you, each one of these cases that I put up there is where it says it ends Medicaid expansion. It ends it.
Who gets the blame for not ending it?
A lot of people say, well, it would have ended anyway. It would. The private option would have ended. Medicaid expansion would not. All we would have done is gone from private insurance policies back to Medicaid expansion. It was the law that directed them to change the state plan to expand Medicaid, and unless that law is changed, it will stay expanded. If Senate Bill 96 had not passed, Medicaid expansion would be continuing with or without the private option after December 31, 2016. That's the cold, hard facts. But that's not what people like to say.
Yep.
And that's what the bill says.
Yep.
But there's confusion. And I will give you, in defense of people who freak out, I can see why there's some confusion based on some of the headlines.
Yeah, so I was one of the ones that freaked out.
When we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass. It's a different situation down here today, and we have the opportunity to make real change and to pass legislation and do things. We also have an opportunity to screw it completely up and get the blame for it.
Yeah, so we're doing a bang-up job. Who gets the blame for hiring a lifelong Democrat? Oh, and by the way, anybody call yet on... No one has called and said that Medicaid expansion was ended and that his bill ended it. We still... Matter of fact, we've confirmed. We still have Medicaid expansion in Arkansas, Joe. Is that what you're telling me? It is confirmed that we still have it?
We have a separate phone just for this one phone call, and we still have not gotten that phone call. It never rings.
Oh, my goodness, incredible. Even though he said it ended it, it didn't. It didn't. And that's like now historic. Like it's in the history books. You said this to a room full of conservatives and then later said this to another room full of conservatives when you put my face on a slideshow, which is fine. I just think it was funny. We had just gotten that brand new affiliate in Russellville broadcasting the program, and the majority leader feels to come on and try to combat. He comes to the meeting to combat directly my message, which is fine. I just think that's interesting. Knowledge is power, and you guys listening to this program are being equipped with knowledge. And this is knowledge they don't want you to have. For example, Randy Bauer. Randy Bauer, it's nothing personal against Randy Bauer. He's the consultant Jim Hendren has hired. He's the consultant that went, and he's a lifelong Democrat. You can be a lifelong Democrat, but excuse me for thinking that you shouldn't be in a massive Republican state, right? We're supposed to have these. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. What does the Republican Party of Arkansas think of this? Probably nothing much, because it's the same Republican Party of Arkansas that will not publicly ask for Jake Files' resignation over in Fort Smith when he's been mentioned in an FBI affidavit. The same Republican Party that won't call out that is hurting their image probably doesn't care that the majority leader, a so-called Republican who wants to be the president pro temp of the Senate, is hiring lifelong Democrats who says tax cuts aren't tax reform necessarily on his Twitter feed, who criticizes Donald Trump on his Twitter feed for blocking him, and then blocks one of this program's listeners last week, who said that Obama is the light on his Twitter feed and Donald Trump is the dark. Let me say that again. This guy that Jim Hendren hired, you have to understand something. On his Twitter feed, bashes Trump and praises Obama, and this is the guy that you bring in. And then on Twitter, he comes and he tweets us and he says, "I'm not a flaming liberal," because that's what I called him. "I'm not a flaming liberal. I look at all perspectives, and I bring everything to the table." Well, here's the problem with that, Randy. Here's the problem with that, Jim. This is why I have such a problem with it. The ideas on the left of the ideological spectrum have been rejected. We have a super majority in the House. We have almost a super majority in the Senate of Republicans that campaign on a Republican platform of lower taxes and less regulation. And you look at Arkansas compared to the rest of the states around us, it costs almost $8,000 a person to run our government when it costs $5,000 to run Oklahoma or Texas government. It doesn't make any sense. This is easy stuff. It just requires you to actually legislate and put your name next to it and not be afraid to enact conservative policies and principles. A lifelong Democrat advising Republicans makes no sense. Oh, and by the way, we have a Republican governor too, or so people say. I don't know. This is all at his feet, by the way. This is all Asa trying to control the outcome. I mean, that's what this is. Just like he wanted to control the outcome of the task force on Obamacare. And we called it from day one. From day one, we told you what was really going to happen. Do you know why? Because it was completely out in the open. All you had to do was read. You had to get past the personalities. Well, but he's always had a conservative voting record. Well, but this is what he's doing. You have to be able to read what they're doing. You have to be able to listen to what they're saying and in this case, I mean, come on. Does Jim Hendren, if I'm wrong this time, which I wasn't last time, if I'm wrong this time, do you really expect a reasonable person to believe that Randy Bauer is going to recommend Reagan-esque like tax cuts, Milton Friedman economics? Do you really believe that's what he's going to do? Do you really believe a lifelong Democrat is going to come to the state of Arkansas and say, you know what, you're spending too much, you need to spend less in all of these departments and take that money and give it back to the taxpayers? Do you really think a lifelong Democrat is going to come even close to that recommendation? The answer is no. The answer is no 1,000 times. It is basic. And yet, no, I got exposed. I got exposed by some talk radio guy. I go into the newspaper, $100 million. We're going to start with $100 million in income tax cuts. What they don't tell you is they're going to raise taxes everywhere else. It's a shell game. It's ridiculous. Folks, before we go to break, if you think the information that you're hearing on this program is valuable and you want more of it, I want to invite you to partner with me. We have a Patreon page, Patreon, patreon.com/thephp. And for 3 different tiers, you can partner with us on a monthly basis. You can become a Liberty Machine engineer for $5 a month and get access to our Wednesday Weekly, which is a new video with fresh content, and we'll have another one out this Wednesday. If you join now, you'll get to go back and watch all of the other Wednesday Weeklies that we've been putting out. That's for $5 a month, and you get access to community message board. For $10 a month, you can become a Paul Harrell program producer, which we're going to send you, which we've already sent. A monthly list of topics for Paul to discuss, for me to discuss, or a list of guests that you want to hear. And you get to actually submit your own. If it's not on the list, you can submit your own topic, or you can submit your own guest that you want me to interview. And I'm already getting responses back from the patrons that we do have, and I really appreciate that, and we're going to make good on that. Disclaimer, though, I can't force Jake Files to come on the program. I had a vote for Jake Files. I can't force him to come on. Okay? Or Asa or anybody else. So don't ruin your don't waste your vote, but feel free if you can make a protest vote for this.
If you want to vote for Dan Douglas, go for it.
Yeah, if you want to vote for Dan Douglas, that's fine. I can't guarantee Dan's going to come on the program. Although, you know what? I think Dan just might. Conduit Media Insider, $25 a month. You get everything below, the Wednesday Weekly, the lists and the polls. You also get a Liberty Machine t-shirt, and you become a Conduit Media Insider. Depending on fundraising goals, we're going to have events, invitation-only events for you to come. I'll do a live broadcast, and we're going to talk about Liberty in Arkansas and what we can do, a strategy session. It drives the left, the other side nuts. Just to know that there's a Wednesday Weekly video, who knows what I'm saying? Well, you're not going to know unless you subscribe. If you believe this program has value, if you want to keep this program on the air, and you want to see us grow and make the videos better, make the content on this broadcast better, if you see a value in it, please consider to becoming a Patreon subscriber, $5, $10, or $25 a month. It's all at patreon.com/thephp. Back in just a moment.
The Paul Harrell Program.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues, from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are 2 matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Do you need to advertise your business product or service, but not sure what the best choice is? Folks, allow me to introduce you to talk radio. You're listening to it right now. Talk radio is one of the most unique mediums in all of advertising because it actually works. It gets the information you want to the people you want to get it to. And by the way, those people are educated, well-informed decision makers of their household, and most of them have disposable income. If this is a target audience for your business, then you have to consider advertising on my show, The Paul Harrell Program. We have options for most any budget and can provide you with exciting opportunities to grow your business. We can put your message across the state, or we can help you locally. Call 870-275-9755 if you have any questions. That's 870-275-9755, or visit my website, paulharrell.com, and click on Advertise.
Yeah, not to mention, even for you have to forgive me. Even for Senator Hendren to go to the paper and say the starting point is $100 million, $100 million is a drop in the bucket. That's not that much money. They like to brag, $100 million we've cut your taxes, and then another $50 million. It's $150 million we've cut taxes since Asa's been here. Well, they've also increased spending, though. You talk about a Kansas waiting to happen. We're already going down that path. But $100 million, folks, they wasted $200 million on software that never worked like it was nothing. It was no big deal.
Well, not just that. If you, with the numbers you gave, I took the population of Arkansas and multiplied it by 8,000. I just did a rough shot, $8,000 to per person.
I think it's like 7,600 or something. But yeah,
it's either way, it's $23.9 billion to like a year to run the Arkansas government.
It's about right too, by the way.
Yeah. So $100 million is literally a drop in the hat. It's chump change for the Arkansas government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And they're going to say, state budget $5 billion. Well, no, when you take all the feds and everything else, all that stuff that comes in, what it takes to run our government is vastly more expensive than you look at the same numbers in Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana. They average $5,000 per capita. We average over $7,000, well over $7,000. So it's not. These are the problems that you want to fix. And in order to do it, you have to shrink the size of government. And you got to be willing to defend it to a hostile press. Because every one of these bureaucrats is going to run to the press. Every one of them. Ask yourself why the media covers Asa Hutchinson so favorably, so positively. Ask yourself about that. Pretty incredible. Something doesn't make sense about it. When we come back, we got some more stuff to talk about. 3 things. The fallout from general improvement funds being found unconstitutional. I want to talk more about that. We also have a new Conduit for Action article, as well as the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, announcing some religious liberty instructions to other prosecutors that really and truly I just am very thankful that Donald Trump was elected president. Let me just say that. The number one protected class of people since 1789, people with religious convictions, It's being reaffirmed here. Of course, the left in meltdown mode. Similar to the way the left should be here when we, quote, do tax reform. But no, we hire a Democrat. Back in a minute.
Rush, Glenn, Sean, and Paul. This is Jonesboro's 1013 FM News Talk, KBTM.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
We're losing about $1.6 billion in manufacturing GDP as a result of having such a high tax burden. And then another way that we did that is just looking at the average tax burden in the region, saying, if we just move to the average, became more competitive in our region. We're not looking at going to zero.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking at going to 1%. We're just trying to be average. What would that bring us to? And that, running through that estimation puts us at increasing GDP, manufacturing GDP by about 1.5 billion to 1.6 billion, assuming all else is equal.
Gosh. So, I mean, we're essentially, what we're hearing, folks, we're talking with Jacob Bundrick from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. So we're hearing that the tax burden in Arkansas is prohibiting, manufacturing from being able to produce more. It's inhibiting their productivity. And you've mentioned the sales tax rates. You've mentioned the corporate income tax rates. So why do you think that ranks as the most significant factors? And when we're talking about what's hurting manufacturing, why is it the corporate tax? Why is it the sales tax?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because that's always the next step in one of these analyses is to think about what's causing that. And so the corporate income tax is fairly easy to explain. There's a lot of literature on this, and what it suggests is that the corporate income tax raises the cost of user capital. And basically what that means is corporations end up investing less than they would have. When we tax them, it actually raises the cost of capital to them, so they're less inclined to invest in more capital, which make people more productive, and so we end up with less output. The sales tax is interesting, and it's a little bit counterintuitive than what you'd expect. But we suspect there's some other channels that's working through. Most states exempt manufacturing inputs and business-to-business inputs or sales from the sales tax. So you wouldn't really expect that the sales tax would increase the cost of capital. Arkansas used to tax the input of business machinery, but we got rid of that in the last session when we flipped InvestArk and exempted that sales tax. So that's a natural step for a next study, is looking at what is the root cause of sales tax affecting manufacturing productivity.
Yeah. On page 17, you discuss in your paper about how an inventory tax and a capital stock tax, you mentioned these, and I'm not really familiar with this. Can you explain to us what those are and what their impact is on the manufacturing productivity? And can we reform these?
Yeah, certainly. So an inventory tax is essentially a property tax on a business's inventory. So you think about someone who's going through, or someone who has a manufacturing facility. They have these raw materials. They have halfway finished goods. They have some finished goods that are sitting in the warehouse. So we actually apply a property tax to that inventory. Wow. And that's problematic because it distorts business decisions, right? So you think about, we don't have an Amazon warehouse around here because we would tax all that inventory that's in that warehouse, right? And
hang on. Now that's interesting.
Decisions
Jacob,
about how much to produce, how much to hang on to.
Yeah.
And we don't really want them thinking about those decisions. We want them thinking about how do they make a better product, which markets do they need to get to, things of that nature. So we're distorting their process there.
Well, I want to mention,
it's also called a franchise tax.
Yeah, Jacob, can you hear me?
It's a tax on a business's wealth. All right. So in a lot of ways, it serves as a duplicate income tax. We already have an income tax. It's not really clear why we would need to tax a business again on top of that. But both of these are really outdated taxes, and we should really think about reforming them.
Yeah. Jacob, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Sorry. I was trying to talk over you. I apologize. You mentioned if Amazon came here, we would be taxing the stuff sitting on their shelves that hasn't been sold yet if they had a warehouse. And there was talk about us trying to get, an Amazon warehouse here, maybe using, maybe turning to form a military base into that sort of thing. And, what you've just essentially told us is there's no way they would do that. There's no way they would come here and then be subject to our oppressive tax code.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why businesses make location decisions. It's, they got to think about how close they are to their suppliers, to their downstream firms, the workforce they can get. But tax policy certainly plays a role in that, right? And there's certain things that we can control. There's certain things we can't control. We can't help that we're not on the ocean. I would love to move Arkansas to the ocean and go to the beach every day, but that's just not going to change. But tax policy is one of the things that we can change. And when we have these distortive taxes like an income tax, or an inventory tax, then yeah, it does play a role in these firms' decisions.
Really good stuff. Okay, let's move. Let's see. Backing up a little bit, over on page 13 of your paper, targeted tax incentives, corporate welfare, alters firm costs in a way that makes less productive firms become low-cost producers. Resources will shift from high-productivity firms to low-productivity firms. This shift decreases overall productivity and economic growth. So that's from the paper. Does this mean
the maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey, folks, it is hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine. And if you want to help us out, contribute to the program, one of the ways you can do that is to call us or text us 870-275-9799, or you can sound off on any of our platforms, YouTube, Facebook. We would appreciate it. All right. Let's see. Where do we go from here? I tell you what I want to start. I'm going to talk about the GIF fallout here in just a minute. I know that's what we've planned on talking about. But did anybody see Roby Brock's? Roby Brock over at Talk Business and Politics, his weekly his weekly television show. Did anybody get a chance to see that? It's he interviews politicos and things like that about the events of the day, and Roby interviewed the minority leader and the head of the Democrat Party here in Arkansas, Michael John Gray, and then he also interviewed State Representative Charlie Collins. Okay. Now, they talked mostly about guns, what happened to the tragedy in Las Vegas, what needs to be done, that sort of thing. I'm not really interested in that. Towards the end of the interview, Roby Brock decided to ask Michael John Gray, again, head of the Democrat Party, if anybody was going to throw in their hat to run for governor from the Democrat Party and challenge Asa Hutchinson.
Representative Gray first. You guys got a candidate for governor to challenge the governor yet on the Democratic side?
There are definitely people talking about it. Nobody ready to put their name out there yet.
All right, Representative.
Definitely people talking about it. Not ready to put their name out there yet. That's because nobody wants to be the guinea pig. Nobody wants to be the sacrificial lamb. The scapegoat, if you will. Most of these Democrats are perfectly happy with Governor Asa Hutchinson. They count themselves blessed to have Asa Hutchinson. Yeah, they may not agree with everything, like guns or defunding Planned Parenthood of the Heartland. but they are pretty happy with his policies. They are happy that Asa Hutchinson has held off the real reforms that they would hate, like shrinking the size of government. I'm being perfectly honest with you here, and I think you know this is the truth. The Democrats consider themselves blessed that Asa Hutchinson is the Republican that the people chose, because they know he's not one of those Republicans, the ones they talk about, the ones that actually have a commitment to the principles that they run on. Not one of those Republicans. He's reasonable. He's an intellectual Republican that will find a way to keep government growing, spending more. Now, that's pretty interesting. I have a text in response to that, by the way. I just want you to know, Kevin in Craighead County is saying that the Arkansas Republicans are actually a new political party, and they should be called the Neo-Dems. Kevin, I'm going to adopt that. I like that. Joe, I'm going to write that down, Joe. You can feel free. Let's see, I like the Neo-Democrat Party of Arkansas. The Neo-Dems. And we could call them the Dems. Neo-Dems, D-I-M-S. Maybe that's a whiteboard for next week. The Neo-Democratic Party of Arkansas. That's what we're fighting. Look, if Asa Hutchinson can rename things to try to, I can rename things. And the Republican establishment and the Democrat establishment, they have created a new party. They are the Neo-Democrat Party of the state of Arkansas. That's what we're facing. Speaking of whiteboards, our whiteboard this week asks the simple question: what is the goal? What is the goal? My goal is to see the intersection of conservative ideas and reality actually happen. It's very simple. The ideas we talk about actually exist and are implemented. That's my goal. Now, if that's the end goal, we have a lot of people who are up in government that are not doing those things and are working against those things. So part of this goal, in my opinion, is knowledge. Knowledge is power. One of the end headlines or end sentences at the newest Conduit for Action piece about the platforms says, the more you know. Knowing is half the battle. No, not the more you know. It just says knowing is half the battle. The G.I. Joe thing. And that's exactly right. Knowing is half the battle. And I know there's some disagreement on this, but you could maybe possibly even say, now hear me out, that knowing is the whole battle. And that's not necessarily the case. That's necessarily the case, but let me tell you why it may be the case. Because what is the goal? That's the whiteboard. What is the goal? Intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Okay? There are people that know what I say is true, and they choose to do nothing. One more time. There are people who know. They've got my information. They've got Conduit's information. They know it's true, but they agree with the status quo, and they choose to take that information and do nothing with it. So in that case, that actually works against my argument that knowing is the entire battle. But I have a theory, and this theory is this is what it is. Not enough people know. I believe the vast majority of Arkansans, when presented the facts, agree with me. And I think politicians know this. That's why they try to keep this knowledge. They try to combat this knowledge. I think issue by issue, if you were to go down and I were to give them a brief history of the last 5 years of this state, most Arkansans, in fact, the vast majority of Arkansans, when presented with the facts of what the Republican Party said versus what they're doing and even allowing to this day, they would say that they were raised to believe that that kind of behavior and actions or lack thereof is deceptive at best and outright lying to people intentionally to achieve power at worst. And I believe that when the vast majority of people hear it, they will make distinct changes by their vote, with their vote, to those who are in positions of power. So that is my argument for why knowledge may be the whole battle. Is just getting this program or the articles that you read at Conduit for Action out to as many people as you can. Doing things like supporting us on Patreon for a small amount of money a month in order to make the show better and get more content. These things are what I believe can ultimately get us to the point where we realize the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. I mean, that is my goal. I thought about this all day. What is the goal? That's my goal. Is what I say it at the beginning of every program, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are stating a goal. We are basically, it's the opening paragraph of of an essay. That's what it is. And you can apply, I mean, for example, the intro. And look, some people will say, well, your intro's long. I know it's long, but the information in there is essentially our opening paragraph of every essay. I mean, think about this in comparison with the Second Amendment and what's going on right now with bump stocks or whatever. There's a massive tragedy, and it's awful. And what does the government do? We're racing in to try to fix a problem that we will never, ever fix, but we're going to do it anyway. What does Milton Friedman say at the beginning of every show, of every hour? The maintenance of a free society is a difficult thing to maintain because it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind, a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere. That, ladies and gentlemen, can be applied to not just the Second Amendment and the government trying to weaken it. It can be applied to everything that the government tries to do in our name to make our lives safer, or better, or whatever. Okay? So, what is the goal? Goal is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. That's the goal. And knowing is at least half the battle. It might be the whole thing. As far as your effort goes, it might be the whole thing. Because if everybody knows, there's going to be people that find out and do nothing with the information. Do nothing. They don't contribute any. They're in with the other side. Or they just don't care. They're apathetic, and they don't think liberty's that important. Okay, you're going to run into those people. I don't think that's the case of the statesmen that are listening to this program, the people that want Arkansas to become the most conservative place that it can be, and actually have a government that reflects the views of the people. Right now, we don't have that. We have people that voted for Republicans, and they need to know that the people in power at the top, not all the Republicans, but the ones who are controlling things, are trying to stop the very ideas they campaigned on from becoming a reality. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. One more thing. Roby Brock, Talk Business and Politics, went on to ask State Representative Charlie Collins this question.
Collins, are we going to see a primary with Jan Morgan challenging Governor Asa Hutchinson?
Obviously, the beauty of a free country is anybody is allowed to run for any office they choose. I am a staunch, strong, and immovable supporter of Governor Hutchinson. I think he's a wonderful conservative and doing a fantastic job as governor.
Charlie Collins, he has the knowledge. He chooses to do nothing with it but support the status quo. You're listening to the Paul Harrell program. Back in just a moment.
The Paul Harrell program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
This is State Representative Dan Sullivan with a Liberty Moment. If all men are created equal, that's final. If they are endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights, that's final. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that's final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions. If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction in which he can proceed historically is not forward but backward, toward the time when there was no equality, no rights of the individual, and no rule by the people.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
The Paul Harrell program.
All right, as I promised this hour, the fallout continues for general improvement funds and the people who are lining up, I believe, to act like they are outraged or agree with the Arkansas Supreme Court's ruling last week saying that general improvement funds are unconstitutional because they do not have a specific purpose, and the Arkansas legislature has to assign them a specific purpose. The fallout's continuing, and there's going to be a lot of people saying this is a good thing, because, this is a good thing because there's been so much corruption and everything else, but really we have nothing to do because we've already done what needs to be done. This is essentially the attitude of Jonathan Dismang, the president pro temp of the Senate. Who writes this article real quick? Lisa Hammersley, John Moritz, writing that Senate President pro temp Jonathan Dismang, a Republican of Searcy, said the legislature is already moving toward a more transparent system. In an interview Friday, Dismang said he would like to see both the legislative and executive portions of the General Improvement Fund moved into a single pot of rainy day funds. Spending money from that fund requires a request by the governor and approval from the Legislative Council. Quote, he writes, or says, that's a transparent process. The public is made aware through the governor's letter, and there can be discussion in the legislature, Dismang said. So everybody's very quick now to give Asa credit because he already ended the program. But let me set the record straight. He tried to end the program in 2015 and made a big announcement and took all of the publicity. He's ending general improvement funds, and then he snuck it back in at the end of 2015 session because everybody got really upset about it. Well, now, of course, we have the corruption and everything else, and there was no way they could continue it as is. But think about this for a second. This Supreme Court ruling, in my mind, everybody should go to the Arkansas Constitution and should read the portion that says, if the legislature spends money, you have to have 3/4 of each chamber to do it. Think about that. 3/4 majority. Now, Governor Asa Hutchinson is on record, at least once, but I want to say multiple times, as having disdain for the 3/4 budgetary requirement rule. This is when we go into an actual fiscal session, that he has disdain for this, that he thinks it's too extreme, that you have to get to 75% agreement in the House and 75% agreement in the Senate in order to spend the people's money. The Democrats believe it's too extreme, too, if you really want to know the truth about it, because they believe government is just naturally a predominant force, that it simply is. They if they really got down to it, they resent this idea of the people having such a powerful tool, or the people's representatives and senators having such a powerful tool to derail what they want to accomplish. It's actually a fantastic provision, one that Asa Hutchinson, some say, had unconstitutionally got around it, but that's a whole nother story. Ask yourself the question, is the Legislative Council, that is a rubber stamp for anything Asa Hutchinson wants, is that 3/4? Is that 3/4 of the full 100-member House of Representatives and 35-member Senate? The answer is no. It's a special group of legislators that get to run the state in their absence. Now, what's funny about this is, if you really think about it, the idea that we would take general improvement funds and keep them around but have a more transparent process, folks, they will vote, this Legislative Council, they will vote when people are out of the room. They'll do whatever they have to give Asa Hutchinson what he wants. And we've seen it time and time again. This is a terrible idea, and we really have to be careful about it, because the main thing that this will do is increase the power of Governor Asa Hutchinson to reward people he agrees with if he's in charge of the money, and punish those he disagrees with if he's in charge of the money. Again, this should be done with 3/4 majority of each House, the Senate and the House, not on some legislative council. It's very important that we understand that. And to me, the Arkansas Supreme Court's decision, the one that said GIF is unconstitutional because it has no specific purpose and legislators are getting credit for it and everything else. I mean, that was the problem. It really just highlights the constitutional constraints on the government in the name of the people. And if you're going to spend our money, you have to have 75% of both chambers. Now, we should take pride in that, not be on record as saying, it's really too steep of a requirement. It's only too steep because you don't think you're going to get what you want, which is to spend more money. In an interview Friday, Dismink said, the transparent that's a transparent process. The public is made aware through the governor's letter, and there can be discussion. Note, I don't have there may be more to this quote somewhere, but can there be rejection? That's an honest question. Can there be rejection? Because the last time the legislative panel tried to reject the DHS contract the governor wanted to spend, the governor went ahead and gave the money to the contractor in spite of their objections over at the legislature. I mean, is that the same thing that we're going to see here? If it's unconstitutional to give the planning development districts a big chunk of money to spend wherever they want. Somebody tell me how it's constitutional to give Asa Hutchinson a big chunk of money to spend how he wants. Well, the Legislative Council, but is that 3/4? That's not 3/4. Plus, it's a rubber stamp. Legislative Council does what the governor wants. Keep in mind, governor's got money. These legislators want that money. We're going to have the exact same problems. It's only a matter of time before they figure out how to get something in return for this. We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
That these corporate welfare programs, like, let's say, the Governor's Quick Action Closing Fund, actually hurt current manufacturing?
Well, I just want to put a caveat in there. It's not guaranteed that these incentives will necessarily shift resources from these high-cost producers to these low-cost producers, or these high-productivity firms to these low-productivity firms. But it's a very real chance, and those sometimes have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But it's a very real possibility that happens. In terms of incentives as a whole, whether they help or they hurt, there's an extensive amount of literature on this that suggests that incentives generally don't help the broad economy. We've actually got a few papers in the works right now specifically looking at this. One of them should be out in the next month or so, and then another one's a little bit down the road. So when those are fine-tuned, I'd love to come on and talk more about those for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And just kind of wrapping up here, again on 13, economic growth largely stems from productivity increase. That's pretty basic. When people are more productive, like you said earlier, we have more economic growth. So does this mean that government doesn't create jobs? I mean, is that what you would take
That's
from
right.
that?
We should be focused on helping people become more productive. This is almost, if anything is going to be a truth in economics, this is the closest thing to it. That productivity increases economic growth. So we should be looking for ways to help that. It's, things like education, things like not distorting production decisions that might influence how productive firms are able to make their employees. So we should be focusing on productivity.
Yeah. Okay. I know I said last question, but this is the last question. Unrelated to your paper, Jacob. The Donald Trump, in his tax speech today, his proposal, and the Freedom Caucus supports it. I mean, it looks like they're going to get this thing passed. They're going to be eliminating, though, the deductions on state and local taxes. And I was just wondering, I mean, don't you think that could really end up? I mean, now Arkansans, if you're in that top bracket and paying basically 7%, you're no longer going to be able to deduct that from what you owe the federal government. You have any thoughts on that just initially?
I'd really love to comment on that, but I haven't actually looked at his proposal yet, and then two, I spend most of my day looking at the state policy, so I haven't had a really good chance to look at that and form an opinion on it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's something I'll look at and can get back to you on.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's a big deal. My thought is, good thing that Asa and the Republican-led legislature have spent the last 3 years reforming our tax code. Oh wait. No, they haven't, and we have really high tax rates that now we're not going to be able to deduct off of our federal income tax bill if this goes through as is. Jacob Bundrick, I appreciate it, sir. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate your research and coming on here and sharing it with this great audience.
Yes, sir. I'm always happy to come on and visit with you, Paul.
All righty, Jacob. Be safe, folks. We're going to take a break. The Liberty Machine rolls on. Back in just a moment.
The Paul Harrell Program.
All right, 870-275-9799. The Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, this is from Red State, issues epic guidance to Department of Justice on religious liberty. Folks, I could not be more happy with this. This, to me, it's not as big of a deal as Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, clearly, because that can go, that can help the country for decades. This, 4 years, maybe 8. But I want to read this to you because in light of, I will tell you, I talked to people during the Trump-Clinton election that said, if Hillary Clinton is elected, our religious freedom is over. I even said that from behind this microphone, that there's no question where the country's headed. There's no question that they are willing to deny conscience of people, of individuals, and Hillary lost. Here's the evidence that Hillary lost. You ready? Last week, the Department of Health and Human Services released new regulations on Obamacare, where the old regulations forced health plans for Catholic nuns to pay for birth control pills. The new regulations allow religious employers and employers with religious objection to contraception to not provide the coverage in health plans. The left is freaking out about that one because, of course, you have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and a right to demand that your employer pay for birth control. Everybody knows the two go hand in hand. With what slipped under the radar, though, was a pair of letters issued by Attorney General Jeff Sessions on how Department of Justice will handle religious liberty cases. The directions implements President Trump's executive order on religious liberty. It is game-changing, Red State writes. Listen to this. This is the preface of the rules. Religious liberty is a foundational principle of enduring importance in America, enshrined in our Constitution and other sources of federal law. As James Madison explained in his memorial against religious assessments, the free exercise of religion in its nature, an unalienable right, some of these are quotes, because the duty owed to one's creator is precedent, both in order of time and in degree of obligation, to the claims of civil society. Religious liberty is not merely a right to personal beliefs, personal religious beliefs, or even to worship in a sacred place. It also encompasses religious observance and practice. Except in the narrowest of circumstances, no one should be forced to choose between living out his or her faith and complying with the law. Now, first of all, huge, but he also used his or her. I can't believe he's using those pronouns. Therefore, to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law, the preface goes on, religious observance and practice should be reasonably accommodated in all government activity, including employment, contracting, and programming. The following 20 principles should guide administrative agencies and executive departments in carrying out this task. These principles should be understood and interpreted in light of the legal analysis set forth in the appendix to this memorandum. Red State writes that the preface alone moves the federal government in the correct direction. The Obama administration had focused, on creating the freedom of worship. And that's what Obama would say. You have the freedom to worship. You have the freedom to worship. And they wanted to confine freedom of religious liberty to freedom of worship, which meant you're able to worship on one day a week inside the four walls and a roof of a church. But you go outside that church, you don't have freedom of religion. You have freedom to worship. Right, and it's a huge, huge shift. So just in the preamble alone of these new, directives, you have a huge shift from Obama to Donald Trump. Let's go over some of the principles here. This is incredible to me. The principles. The free exercise of religion, Jeff Sessions, includes the right to act or abstain from action in accordance with one's religious beliefs. The freedom of religion extends to persons and organizations. Americans do not give up their freedom of religion by participating in the marketplace, partaking of the public square, or interacting with government. Thank you. I mean, that's an amazing statement, because folks, we were close. We were so close to that not being a thing anymore. I talked to members of the LGBT RSTLNE Would You Like to Buy a Vow community, and they told me down at the Marble Palace, this was back when Asa caved on religious liberty. Do you remember when Asa Hutchinson caved on your religious liberty? I do. I was there, and I was interviewing the protesters, and they were making this argument to me. They were saying, if you don't want to be forced to perform abortions, you should have thought about that before you went to medical school. That's what they told me. You should have thought about that before you went to medical school, saying that you are now in the marketplace, you're in healthcare, and you have to perform any procedure that anybody wants you to. The same thing with a cake baker. The same thing with a florist. You chose to have a business. If you want to have that business, you will participate in ceremonies that you consider to have religious significance. It still is, but it was a much darker time than it is now with this directive. Again, Americans do not give up their freedom of religion by participating in the marketplace, partaking of the public square, or interacting with government. This new directive from the Attorney General to the Justice Department. This goes out to all these prosecutors, by the way. Another principle: government may not restrict acts or abstentions because of the beliefs they display. Government may not officially favor or disfavor particular religious groups. Government may not interfere with the autonomy of a religious organization. Isn't it good to hear Jeff Sessions put out a memorandum saying that this is what the government may not do to you? He goes on, religious employers are entitled to employ only persons whose beliefs and conduct are consistent with the employer's religious precepts. How's that for an entitlement, leftists? Religious employers are entitled to employ only persons whose beliefs and conduct are consistent with the employer's religious precepts. It goes on, as a general matter, the federal government may not condition receipt of a federal grant or contract on the effective relinquishment of a religious organization's hiring exemptions or attributes of its religious character. How far we have come with this alone. How far we have come from Lois Lerner and the thuggery of the IRS putting Tea Party groups through extra scrutiny who wanted 501c3 status. They wanted tax-exempt status. Do you know what? The IRS asked the groups in their application had to submit what their meetings were like, and in their meetings, in the format, they said that they opened with a prayer. The IRS responds under Lois Lerner and asks, what's the content of your prayers? When you pray, tell the government what you pray. I've told you before what a threat belief in a higher power is to people in government that don't believe in a higher power. Because you see, they believe that they're their own God and that your rights come from them. What a difference. Red State goes on, this is all great stuff, and it's a shame that the Attorney General has to spell out in detail what the First Amendment takes for granted. The left is portraying this all as a freedom to discriminate, of course. This is nonsense, and the complaining is based solely upon the way the left has used the special rights they see as being owed to homosexuals as a battering ram to drive religion and religious people and groups out of public life. In the words of Philadelphia Archbishop Charles Caput, evil talks about tolerance only when it's weak. When it gains the upper hand, its vanity always requires the destruction of the good and the innocent, because the example of good and innocent lives in an ongoing witness against it. So it always has been, so it always will be. This letter is accompanied by a policy directive that tells U.S. attorneys to ensure the position they take in any case adheres to these principles to the extent of changing the position taken by the justice under Obama. And it directs that all proposed federal rules be screened for adherence to these principles. Big deal. This was a huge win for those of us who knew what the stakes were versus, when looking at the idea of a Hillary Clinton presidency. We knew what the stakes were. This is a victory. It's scary, again, that you have to clarify what the First Amendment actually says, but just look at the people that have no idea what it says. It's a big victory. Moving on now, I want to direct your attention to Conduit for Action. They have a fantastic new piece, and the headline here, Do Your Republican Office Holders Follow the Republican Platform? Now, some of this is retreading. Some of this, they show you Conduit for Commerce's scorecard and everything like that, which is great, and the links are here. But CFA writes that they want to give you the tools to know whether your elected officials ignore or follow the party platform and principles. And if you're frustrated with Republicans who spend their time growing government, passing taxes, and supporting the value of progressives, then you need to read this article. There is a battle in the Republican Party between those who believe in Republican principles and those Republicans who ignore them and instead promote big government and liberal values. It's hard to miss the battle at either the federal or state level. At the federal level, there's Senator John McCain, and at the state level, there's Governor Asa Hutchinson. For example, our governor supported an internet sales tax, which is expressly rejected by the national platform. Marjorie Greenberg recently submitted an op-ed to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Greenberg is a former senior advisor to Governor Asa Hutchinson and currently is the director of the Arkansas Health Care Association, which is essentially the nursing home industry. In the op-ed, Greenberg referred to Conduit for Commerce as a, quote, right-wing pressure group. Funny thing about that, although not Republican organizations, the playbook for Conduit for Commerce and Conduit for Action is essentially the Republican principles and platform concerning limiting government, personal responsibility, taxes, and economic freedom. This is not to single out Greenberg, who is not an elected official. The point is, this is the same way the establishment views you if you dare follow the Republican principles. Think about it. Republicans who think you are a right-winger if you value the platform and principles of their own party. And let me stop there. In that piece, I got to point this out. In that piece, Marjorie Greenberg was defending the hiring of consultants for those of people who were saying we don't need to hire consultants. And I would just say we hired a lifelong Democrat to advise Republicans on tax policy. That is a fact. So I want to remind everybody that. We talked about that the first hour. Go check out the podcast. You may be thinking, shouldn't Republicans who do not like Republican principles either find a party that fits them, maybe rename their party, the Neo-Democratic Party of Arkansas, or at least be honest and try to change the Republican platform so that it matches their Democrat-light actions? That won't happen, because they like to hide behind the Republican label while ignoring Republican principles. If you are a Republican office holder or candidate, have you read the Republican principles and platform? If you're a member of the Republican County Committee or a Republican County Committee, have you read the documents? Has your committee ever hosted discussion on the platform? Does your committee give candidates a copy of the principles and platform? If you're a Republican voter, has anyone ever showed you how to find a copy of the Republican principles and platform on the internet so you can search them and see how your Republican politicians are doing? Conduit for Action wants to provide you with convenient links to help you judge how the actions of your Republican politicians compare to the principles and platform. And they include links on this article at conduitforaction.org to the party platforms of the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, as well as the Democrat Party, the Communist Party, and the Democrat Socialists of America Party. And we're out of time, but tomorrow on the program or sometime this week, I want to break out to actually read to you some of these, like the Democrat Socialists and the Communist Party USA, because it's refreshing to hear people actually say and be honest who are radical leftists and be honest and say what they actually want. It's actually refreshing to say that capitalism is evil, where, you know, you may have Republicans that claim capitalism is great, but then they go and they work by uniting government and business to create a system where it's not capitalism and it's, in fact, fascism. And they don't realize that because they haven't thought it through, or they just really enjoy the status quo, the power, and the clout that comes with positions of power. All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program. We're going to be back in just a moment.
The Paul Harrell Program. If you would like information about advertising or supporting the Paul Harrell Program and Conduit Media Group, call 870-275-9755. Join the fight against big government and advance the preservation of liberty by calling 870-275-9755. The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group. What you cooking? It smells familiar.
I'm cooking something amazing, new, and different, and you're going to love it, babe.
Really? It seems like we've had this dish before.
Don't believe me? Come and taste it for yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm right. This tastes just like Obamacare.
No, actually, it's the new private option. I call this fantastic new dish Arkansas Works.
That's odd, because it looks and tastes just like Obamacare.
Why do you always have to be so critical? I'm in here cooking, trying to do something nice for the family.
Because I thought we talked about this before. I don't like Obamacare.
You just need to give it another chance.
So you admit it's the same?
No, it's different. It's Arkansas Works.
Let me ask you something. Does it smell like Obamacare?
Yes.
Does it taste like Obamacare?
I suppose so.
Are you using the same ingredients to make it as you used to make Obamacare?
Yes.
Then how is your so-called new dish, Arkansas Works, not Obamacare?
Well, let me explain, honey. You will remember, recently, I had my name legally changed at your request, right?
Yes, I know. You had it changed from Duke to Rover. I dislike the name Duke, and I think Rover sounds so much more personally responsible.
Well, now that I'm called Rover instead of Duke, I believe I can take the same recipe and ingredients and create a dish with the same smell and taste from before.
Okay.
And because of my name change, you will love it.
I'm not buying it. And I just realized the name Duke and Rover are both common names for dogs. PHP Parody.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. A quick programming note, or I'm going to say archive note. I have noticed, and I'm just going to be honest with you guys, because Facebook is, sometimes Facebook does strange things with our live videos. So Facebook decided to take down our Thursday video, and I don't know why. Our Thursday video on the Facebook is gone from the archives, but it's not gone from live stream. So if you want to see Thursday's video, we had an interesting, thoughtful discussion on the Federal Reserve. It was really good, about the Babylonian Grain Bank, and it's very good. It's over at paulharrell.com. Click the video archives. I don't know what they've done with it. Now, our Friday, Johnny Cash Friday video is gone as well. Now, this actually typically happens, and I get an explanation for it. And the explanation is you're playing copywritten material, which, you know, this is a radio program, and I am at a radio station where we have a library of Johnny Cash music. You know what I'm saying? And so they don't like that. They don't like the fact that, you know, it's whatever. It's their rules. And if for some reason we ever had to stop doing Johnny Cash Fridays on Facebook Live, I suppose we could. I don't know what would happen if that. But I just want you to know, if you're going to Facebook, and our website is facebook.com/Paul Talk Show. That's the Facebook page. Like us, follow us. And you're looking for past videos on Thursday or Friday's broadcast. I don't know what happened to Thursday broadcast other than we had a really good conversation about the Fed. And I'm assuming Friday is, you know, they've got these algorithms where they can recognize it's really the audio capturing technology is a specific pattern, right? So the sound of my voice, even though it looks like just a bunch of green squiggly lines in the computer, I can see through the window here as they're recording the podcast of what we're saying. It's a specific pattern, right? You know, it may look similar to it, but they're completely different patterns when you get right down to it. And they can, you know, they have software that recognizes, you know, based off a library of stuff that they consider that's, you know, copywritten music. And then they just, you know, they yank the video down. So just bear with us there, but know that if there's ever a video on Facebook that disappears, it'll be over at the website, paulharrell.com. That's Paul Harrell, HARRELL.com. I didn't get to talk about DACA. I was going to. I'm going to probably save that for. I'm going to save that for a Friday segment. The rest of that, along with we had another one about DACA people in Arkansas not getting a nursing license. There's a serious conversation that's going to have to be had about what's going to happen with the Dreamers. There's no question about it, and this is the only thing I'm going to say about this is, and I was talking about this with some friends earlier today. If we're going to go down a path where we have some laws that we don't care about, and we have others that we do, why are we paying an income tax? That's ultimately what it comes down to, is the principle of, well, what does the law say about illegal immigration? What does the law say about me having to submit my quarterly income tax payments? You understand what I'm saying? Now, I mean, the huge difference there is if I don't pay my income tax, I'm eventually going to go to jail. It's what the law says. There are people that are enforcing that law. With the DACA situation, we have not been enforcing our laws, which is why we have this whole problem to begin with. And it's a serious problem with serious consequences. And I personally don't have any faith that the law argument will win over the emotional argument at this point because of who we are as a society, where the emotional argument, it trumps the logical, legal, or conservative argument in this country almost every single time. And that's why I honestly don't see it actually happening where you say, you know, all right, let's round everybody up and get them out of the country. I don't think that that's going to happen. That's what the law prescribes, but we are so far to the point, the emotion is trumping all of that. No pun intended there with the Trump reference. That's all the time we have for today. We're going to be back here on Tuesday with a brand new 2 hours of conservative talk focused on Arkansas issues and the issues that affect you. My name is Paul, and go subscribe to our Patreon page. $5, $10, or $25 a month. Help keep us on the air and keep growing and making our Wednesday weekly videos better. And I'm excited. I'm excited about those Conduit Media strategy sessions. I know the Republican establishment is not, but I am. Folks, Arkansas, thanks for listening. Be safe.